Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest, most profitable decisions. As always, my name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, and I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today we're here with Prashanth, the CEO of Stack Overflow, and we will talk about remote work and hybrid work. He has a lot of experience with this area because he's been working remotely since 2008. So the first question I want to ask you about that is, how did the pandemic impact your approach to remote work, to hybrid work? Obviously, you've been doing remote work before it, but now the whole world transitioned to remote work, and people probably started to think about it differently. What was the impact of it for you, in particular, for your company?
Got it. No, thank you, Dr. Gleb, for having me on the podcast and on your show. Real pleasure to speak with you and sort of share some of our thoughts that hopefully are helpful to your audience. Yeah, so Stack Overflow has been a long time leader in hybrid work. We've been around since 2008, as you pointed out. And we've been both a remote and in-person sort of organization since our founding. But what's interesting is that during the course of the pandemic, we became a 90% remote workforce post-pandemic, permanently remote. Pre-pandemic, we were actually about 40% remote to begin with about 80% of our product engineering that was remote, 60% of our marketing organization that was remote, and the remainder of the organization, were mostly commercial and go-to-market resources, sales folks, et cetera, were more sort of the folks that spent time in the office. So what the pandemic did was effectively move us almost entirely as a remote organization, 90%. And maybe a little bit more specifically about my own role. I joined as a CEO in late 2019, October 2019. And so if you think about the pandemic that sort of broke out in the world right after, in early 2020. So I've been effectively the CEO of this company more than 75% of during my tenure. And we've done a lot over the past 3 years. In fact, next week, this weekend is sort of my 3-year anniversary of the company. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And so during this time, almost through sort of remotely leading this company from Texas, we've gone through a sort of fairly sort of large transformation of the company. We've hired an almost entirely new leadership team that's based all around the country, with the exception of our marketing leader, Cal, who is based in New York City. All my other direct leaders are on either the West Coast, in the Midwest, in Chicago, or in other parts like Texas, like where I am. It's a positive thing. We've scaled across various departments by hiring folks all around the world and the country. And we also led the company through a successful exit last year with the acquisition by Prosus and Naspers. And so we're sort of on this next phase of our journey. But that's sort of some of what we've experienced over the past few years.
That's really exciting. What are the top 3 things you've learned over this transition that you've been obviously the CEO of during the pandemic and making this transition from 40% remote to 90% remote? What have you learned?
Yeah, so I would say, the top 3 things, the first thing probably centers around, ultimately, we talk a lot about, just at a high level, we talk about develop happiness, and we talk about the developer experience. And, I'm fresh off of we had our first ever customer conference called Flow State here in New York City this week, where I spoke a lot about this subject, and we had thousands of our members of our community sort of attend from all around the world. And the whole theme of it centers around this question that you're asking. It's like, what have we learned? We've learned that there are probably about 3 things that really matter to make this really successful. One is making sure that people have great levels of flexibility of in their work, how they work, when they work, and so on, and where they work. Clearly, all these sort of factors, making sure that we are flexible as an organization, and for companies to be flexible, just more generally, I think is one sort of very key element. And in fact, we even did some research that suggested that flexibility, over 50%, 50 to 60% of folks that we talk to, and we do a lot of surveys at Stack Overflow with our very large community, which I'm happy to talk to you about, mentioned that flexibility is one of the top reasons why people are happy at companies. And
Mm.
the second big reason, or the second big sort of takeaway, I would say, is the opportunities to learn. So
Mhm.
about 50% of folks that we've sort of talked to in our community of 100 million monthly visitors, and of course our own learnings from our own company is giving people an opportunity to learn and grow in their careers
Mm.
is super important, especially in a hybrid work environment, because people are
Sure.
sort of really they need an additional way to sort of make sure that they have opportunities beyond sort of formal in-person coaching, which they're used to.
Mhm.
And now we just need to be very deliberate about that subject. And the third point I'd mention is that, especially in a remote and hybrid work environment, productivity, Dr. Gleb, has been a huge focus. And of course, we sort of specialize in this area at Stack Overflow, which is
Mhm.
our products and so on, which I'm happy to walk through. But we've just noticed that productivity, making sure that people are not distracted during
Mm.
their sort of day. We talk a lot about cognitive load, which I know that you think
Mhm.
about some of these subjects, and it's a super important aspect for technologists to not be sort of context switching all the time, to be in
Mhm.
their sort of quote unquote flow state, and sort of carving out time to do sort of deep thinking work versus more sort of rote routine work. And then,
Mhm.
utilization of tools like synchronous tools like this conversation over
Yeah.
Zoom, or asynchronous tools like Stack Overflow for Teams, our SaaS product,
Mhm.
which many, we have 15,000 companies that leverage it. So I think those are the three aspects to sort of, summarize. I would say number one, it's flexibility. Number
Mhm.
two is giving folks an opportunity to learn and grow in their careers. And number three is really making sure that they have a sense of productivity in their work, and primarily through some of the tools that they're leveraging.
Excellent. Now let's talk about productivity. So we'll talk about all three, but let's talk about productivity. When I work with clients on transitioning to hybrid work, future of work, figuring that out, what we find is that in remote work, when their staff are working remotely, that's when they're most productive, at least individually, because they can have that focus. They're least distracted.
Yes.
What have you found in talking to folks who visit Stack Overflow with your clients? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that it's kind of a double-edged sword, and this is something that
Mm.
we try to solve for our customers, because what's happened when I talk to senior technology leaders every day, right? I have
Mhm.
customer calls and with that CTOs or CIOs or VPs of engineering or product leaders, and all of them are sort of battling multiple things. They're battling, of course, hiring, retention,
Mhm.
reskilling their people, all those sort of things. They are obviously driving very large scale transformations, whether it's cloud
Mhm.
transformations or data ML transformations or DevOps or you name it, security transformations. And then finally, they are battling how do you sort of do all of this stuff with very few people in a sort of high flux sort of environment, doing it in
Mhm.
a distributed work environment. Like, how do you do that
Mm.
remotely? And I think generally speaking, companies come to us when they've got a lot of chaos within their organizations, because the tools that you're using and the mechanisms that you've used historically for just sort of more in-person engagements when we were all sort of in the office back in the day are just not sufficient for
Mhm.
how people operate with high levels of focus. So on one hand, you're right in that it gives people the opportunity to be at home and sort of focus and sort of shut stuff off. But on the other hand, they're getting massively disrupted and knocked off their flow state, or knocked off they've been constantly context switching, because they're getting text messages, they're getting chat ops messages through
Mhm.
their Slack and Microsoft Teams, they're getting phone calls, and on top of that they've got the plumber coming in, and you got all these sort of distractions. And so when do you actually get work done when you're sort of constantly being pinged on
Mhm.
various things? So we literally, when we think about productivity, we think about how do we reduce that in the form of asynchronous collaboration. Since Stack
Mhm.
Overflow, obviously, we're the world's largest knowledge base and largest community for technologists. We have close to 100 million people. We've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Our private version of Stack Overflow does exactly that, and then making sure that you can leverage that product as the single source of truth and knowledge, so you don't have to sort of constantly get tapped on the shoulder as a subject matter expert to answer the same questions over and over again. And so being effective in reusing your institutional knowledge versus just kind of reacting all day long is
Mhm.
a huge, sort of productivity difference. And so that's what we focus on. We live and breathe that, and we've been helping 15,000 organizations over the past several years on this subject.
So tell me a little bit about creating this institutional knowledge base that would help reduce those distractions. What does that involve? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, we think that the existing tools, we in 2018, many companies came to us and they said the existing tools that they were using within their companies and organizations were just insufficient to have a single source of truth. Because especially for technologists, when technology is moving so rapidly, and languages are being learned, on average a developer learns a language every year, right? And then there's a lot that's changing, and so the speed is very rapid. The existing documents and internal wikis and other forms of sharing knowledge, emails, this tribal knowledge and people, knowledge in people's heads, just insufficient to scaling that across the organization for you to truly unlock the collective brain, so to speak, of the company to sort of really move forward versus sort of doing the same thing all over the same thing all over the company in silos. So for us, it's about making sure we responded to that, and companies like Microsoft came to us and said they love Stack Overflow because it has 50 million questions and answers on every possible technology topic. It has 100 million monthly visitors, but they would just love to have a private version of that inside their organization with the same gamification and the voting and the badging systems and just the all the things that make Stack Overflow special to use inside their organization. So that's what Stack Overflow for Teams is all about, and was launched back in 2018. And it uses effectively the same sort of algorithms and so the same logic that's been set up on the public website, in addition to integrating with all your in the flow sort of tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams or GitHub or Jira, right? And of course with Okta and things like that, to make sure that you are in the workflow of doing work, but it's capturing, Stack Overflow for Teams is capturing information to be reused as part of. So you could ask a question on Slack, how do I do this on AWS? And that answer, which is answered by one of the colleagues in the company, is going to be stored forever in the company's knowledge base in Stack Overflow for Teams, and can be accessed again and again by anybody else that's onboarding or trying to reskill to understand that same question. So it becomes like this singular source of truth, system of knowledge, which is accessed by any other system of engagement, like your chat ops tools within your organization.
Excellent. That's a very effective knowledge management approach. I want to go back to one of the things that you talked about, another thing that you learned. Tell me a little bit more about flexibility. So you learned more about flexibility, how important that is to people. That's what my clients are reporting as well. That's kind of very, very important for retention, for recruitment, having things like very clearly spelling out your hybrid and remote work policy makes a real difference in recruiting people, retaining people. What have you learned about flexibility, especially as it relates to recruitment and retention?
Yeah, no, I think flexibility is, as I mentioned, one of three things that people care about in terms of their level of happiness and their inclination to stay within a company or potentially go to a new company if that's something that they prioritize. And I think that if we think about flexibility at a high level, it's sort of what I mentioned earlier on. It's like, how you do your work, when you do your work, where do you do your work, right? And so we've noticed in our surveys, and again, our surveys, our Stack Overflow developer survey is responded to, by the way, Dr. Gleb, by about 90,000 respondents a year. That was the number this year. So it's a really meaningful sample, along with additional pulse surveys that we do throughout the year. And one of the big metrics that stood out to us is that over 50% of the people that responded said they really would be not in favor of working for companies that push them to come into the office on a daily basis, right? Or even on a weekly basis. And if we looked at the number of people that are out there working at companies, there's a second statistic that stood out. Out of the number of people working at companies and the kind of the work sort of mechanisms, as in was it hybrid or all in on the office, 85% of the people that responded to us said that they were working either in a fully remote or hybrid environment. Only 15% were working in a office environment. So if you think about it, a company that's growing and looking to sort of fill your technology jobs, and we know all about the technology supply-demand imbalance in terms of talent, right? You are going to be fishing from a very small pool of about 15% of people that are in office sort of workers, if that's your policy in your company. So I think it's just in the best interest of leaders and recruiting departments to be quite flexible on the subject, so that you're able to sort of make sure you are maximizing your chances with the large enough sort of pool of candidates, as an example. So I would just say, those two statistics stand out quite a bit. Of course, people also responded to, as a third statistic, is again over 50 to 60% of folks, I think 56% to be exact, said that they would be not okay with being mandated to work very specific working hours. This is very sort of so for us technologists, or in your case, you're a doctor, a PhD. You understand the 3 a.m. Coding reviews, or
Sure.
the brilliance of finding a point in the middle of the night when you're solving problems. And so people, I think people want the flexibility to do that, because you may want to debug code at 3 a.m. That's kind of when you solve your problem, and you want to give flexibility on that dimension. So those are the sort of some of the items, Dr. Gleb, that I mentioned to you.
Yes, so flexibility is very important. What we do for my clients to help them figure out the future of work is set a certain amount of collaborative hours, several hours a day, when people are expected to quickly respond to Slack messages, emails, and whatnot. And then the rest of the time for people to have a very flexible activity. Also doing some things like virtual co-working, where people get together in a video conference call, but just work on their individual tasks for a brief period of time, and then they can ask any questions that they want. Those I found to be useful techniques that negotiate the challenge of flexibility and team collaboration. I'm curious what you found about negotiating these challenges, because team collaboration implies some lack of flexibility because you have to work with a team, right?
Right.
But there's flexibility is really important for those individual work. What have you found about that?
Yeah, I think luckily for us, we've had a long history of embracing these sort of topics at our company. And again, thanks to the brilliance of our founders, Joe Spolsky and Jeff Atwood, and all they've set up. And when I joined in 2019, of course, the pandemic put everything on steroids a little bit, right? As a CEO, then you're sort of asked to figure out how to balance all these things. And I would say what we've done, I think, pretty well over the past couple of years is that made it a priority, one, to invest in our people, and very much for their growth, through learning and giving them flexibility and making sure we live our core values, which include many of these concepts, by the way. Be flexible is literally one of our, flexible and inclusive is literally one of our core values in our company, right? So we talk about that all the time. But more sort of specifically, I would say, if you think about a few examples, every year, as an example, we bring our entire company together, right? And what I mean by that is, like, physically we come together, right?
Yeah, a retreat.
So it's a kickoff for the year, and we do it. We're on a fiscal year which starts in April, and we brought our entire workforce from around the world to this past year to Philadelphia, where we spent pretty much 3 to 4 days doing all sorts of things. Kicking off the year, I talked about the vision for the company and our product leadership, talked about the roadmap, and our and so on and so forth. We did revenue training and all those sort of things. And so we did all team building exercises. So it was just it's a great way to sort of build bonds, build trust, fill up those sort of buckets, so to speak, that have been drained throughout the year, because it's not easy to sort of do those sort of things just completely online. So I'm convinced that you need a combination of things to build high trust, high functioning teams, as in person as well as sort of hybrid. But you got to do it in a way that balances both those aspects. Give people a ton of flexibility, but also give them the opportunity to get together, because we're all humans at the end of the day, and the human connection, I think, is paramount. And this is, by the way, not something that we did top down saying, or I did top down saying, let's go do this. It is literally the people in the organization wanted to meet. They're like, listen, we crave to meet our teammates in person. There's so much more that we can build from there, and so on. So anyway, that's an example of what we've implemented.
Yeah, definitely. The research has shown that people benefit from building trust by seeing each other occasionally every few months. So that's a very valuable approach. Another thing I want to mention was about retention, and I think have a very good point about the 15% of fishing from a small pond. One interesting thing about that pond is that when you look at the diversity aspects, people who are in underrepresented groups tend to have a much stronger desire to work remotely. So my clients have been finding a lot of benefits in offering remote jobs, that they've been improving their diversity numbers. So the various minorities are much more likely to apply for those jobs. And indeed, Meta came out with a report recently, their diversity report, where they set certain 5-year goals in 2019. And they found that this year, 2022, they already reached their 5-year goals 3 years early, which is very unusual for diversity goals. Usually companies don't reach their diversity goals, but they overachieved because they were one of the companies that's offering remote jobs. I'm curious what you've been finding in that sphere.
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, 100% agree with that point on sort of two dimensions, right? One, I would say is, if I mentioned this at the top of the call, is that even in my own direct leadership team, when I built out my leadership team, because I opened it up, me as the hiring manager in that scenario, opened it up to the full country. And I basically said, like, it actually doesn't matter where people are. I'd just like to get the best, most diverse talent out there that I can sort of find. It has allowed me, as somebody who was building a team, to find phenomenal talent from all around the country. Previously we were known very much as a New York-based startup, and there's only so many people you can hire in New York with in the context of very specific levels, with very specific experience, and from diverse backgrounds. So I think since we opened up again the pool and to find diverse talent from everywhere, I think generally speaking, we've got a very diverse leadership team as a result of that, and because we've been able to sort of increase sort of the volume of folks that we can actually look at. So that, I think, is it's all about the pipeline. It's all about making sure we have enough at the top of the funnel, so to speak, as recruiters know. And if that's not, you'd be restricting yourself if you didn't sort of do that. So that's point number one. Point number two, I'd mentioned, Dr. Gleb, is we 100% agree around this notion of being able to find underrepresented groups and sort of folks that are, maybe even from atypical backgrounds that, for roles, when you think about hybrid work and remote work, because our product actually literally solves for that with Stack Overflow for Teams. Because, I'll just say with engineers or technologists, I don't want to typify, but certainly there's a good chunk of engineers and technologists that are introverts, as an example, right?
Sure.
Or are ramping up into their roles and they're not fully comfortable being part of, in-person meetings where they're able to, have a verbal conversation just in a matter of 30 minutes. And where it's sort of, there's a lot that goes on there in terms of human dynamics. So with our product, it's asynchronous collaboration. So, if somebody asks a question on Stack Overflow for Teams, somebody else from around the world, it could be a question on, let's say, your security release. How do I get the latest version of, XYZ topic? And somebody all around on the other end of the world, somewhere, let's say in Indonesia, in your company, could answer that question, who could be a first year, person in your company, but is also an introverted engineer with maybe even not even a native English speaker, but at the same time is able to answer it based on them knowing the answer to that question, being really, really smart about all things security in your company. And so our product literally solves for, really showcasing these heroes all around the company and showcasing the full contributions of people, irrespective of their own sort of, kind of their own inclinations to be, kind of introverted or extroverted, et cetera. They're getting the recognition to do that. And I would say one other point is that companies have taken what they've done with our product, the Stack Overflow for Teams, and the recognition that they've seen us showcase as the world's best JavaScript programmer in your company or world's best security person in your company, and even tied it to HR awards and basically rewarding these people and recognizing them company-wide to say, this person single-handedly has answered all the security questions in the company, and all the knowledge that that person has, effectively contributed to Stack Overflow for Teams is being reused thousands of times across their company as a result. So yeah, I mean, this is very much we're a big believer in that concept.
Excellent. I think that's been very clear and thorough, Prashanth. Thank you. As we come to the end of our conversations, is there anything else I haven't asked you that you would like to share? Any last words with which you'd like to leave our listeners?
No, I think that, just to say a little bit more about Stack Overflow more broadly, right? So for those of you in your audience that may not be aware of us, so Stack Overflow is the world's largest software developer community and platform. We've been serving close to over 100 million monthly visitors from all around the world. That makes us one of the most popular websites in the world, the top 50 website in terms of traffic. And we've been helping the world's technologists and software developers since 2008 because of the 50 million questions and answers on every possible technology topic that exists on our websites. And all of that information has been reused, as in that knowledge has been consumed and contributed to over 50 billion times since for 14 years. So we are very, very sort of honored to have played a sort of a meaningful role as companies innovate and build the next generation of applications and help them sort of be more technology oriented through all the knowledge in our knowledge base. And again, thanks to our community. That's our foundation, our public platform. And then we have two product lines. One is what I've alluded to a couple of times, which is our market leading knowledge sharing and asynchronous collaboration platform, which is Stack Overflow for Teams, which is basically a private version of Stack Overflow for companies to use inside their organizations, so that they can centralize information and increase efficiency and productivity and onboard their people and reskill their people a lot faster by leveraging the knowledge reuse in the organization. And then the second big product line that we have is something called Reach and Relevance, which is really focused on connecting technologists with companies and through and their products through advertising products and even sub communities where they can opt into on Stack Overflow, or even promoting their companies as great employers of technical talent. So those developers and technologists can apply to those roles at their companies when they go there. So that's sort of our kind of overall sort of product lines, along with our sort of foundational company. And then with Stack Overflow for Teams, we have, as I mentioned, 15,000 organizations, everybody from Microsoft with 100,000 users in the platform to every financial services institution you can think of, the world's biggest retailers and the biggest tech companies that leverage it to effectively collaboratively share knowledge and really be productive within organizations. So just want to make sure everybody was aware of that, and to make sure that if we can be helpful in any of those dimensions, we'd be happy to help them.
Perfect. And can you please tell folks where they should go specifically online to learn more about that?
Yeah, they can go to our website, www.stackoverflow.co. So that's effectively how it's spelled out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Prashanth.
Thank you
to our audience. So again, this has been another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, future work consultancy that sponsors this Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to leave a review on Apple iTunes or wherever you're checking out this podcast, and please make sure to subscribe to it. And I hope you've enjoyed and benefited from this interview with Prashanth, the CEO of Stack Overflow. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.